And for this one, I'm just going to use a pencil, just a 6B, something really soft, really easy, and just kind of use a continuous line. So as I mentioned in this one, I'm not going to lift my pencil. So you're going to have to like go over the lines a bit and kind of really work into what that's going to look like. And it does look a bit different than what you might think, but I think it makes for a pretty cool looking drawing sometimes. It almost has a childlike feel to it as well, but I actually think this makes it kind of cool. I think, I don't remember who said it, but the idea was once you start creating art like a child again, you're maybe you become a master of it. So when you're a kid, you just don't really give a shit. You just do what feels good and you go for it. So I think that's kind of the dream of life. So here, really kind of focusing, as I mentioned, more on the contour and the outlines of things. So again, you can retrace, and I'm realizing here I haven't quite made her legs quite large enough. So I'm going to go in and give another line there, and then kind of work in her hair again. Come back to our hand here. Bring your chin in. Same idea here as well. Legs are a little too tiny. Back in and build this up. Let's get the eyes in there. Shape of the nose, mouth in, eyebrows. The trick is once you take your pencil off, you're done, which is a challenge. So I'm gonna get her collarbones in. Hey, I'm doing good. How are you? So yeah, that would be the contour type drawing there with that. It always looks a bit wonky, and I think it's just super fun because it really feels childlike. You don't have that opportunity to go back and kind of the way I tend to normally work with shapes and weight. You really kind of have to just give into what that flow is, what's going on. So it's a fun way to approach it. So for going back to this one here with the dramatic twist, I'm gonna go back in with a pen and just kind of anchor in some spots there. Add a bit more of the contour lines as well. I'm not too worried about finding the exact edges. I kind of want to just almost use these shadows that you can see here on this artwork as kind of guidelines and draw those shapes, because I can just kind of go in, shade those pretty quick with some cross hatching, things like that. Different techniques. And use those shapes to kind of build them out. And just let the highlights be, because they're equally important as the shadows, as they'll play off each other to define the shapes of what you're working on. Just kind of building in the calf muscle here of what's holding this guy up. As you can see, my proportions weren't spot on with the quick color of the paint, but that's kind of how I like to work, because I want the paint to almost act more as a guideline. I don't want it to be too precise. Sorry, from the get-go. So yeah, just kind of play with some of that shadow of the body too. Put that in a bit more. So we'll arch this guy's back. Get those lats and back muscles working, because they're working pretty hard to have this pose stay in place for sure. Let's work his chest cavity in. Leave a bit of the highlight there. Get this other shoulder. This part of the neck, the other shoulder. Again, just gonna work that in so I can see where I want these shadows to be. Great thing too about the paint for me, I find it kind of gives me a mid-tone sometimes as well to work with. So we'll work in this here. So again, kind of my proportion and placement was off, but again, that doesn't bother me in the least. The end result I think actually looks kind of cool when it's all almost has like an extra layer of design to it. Because at this stage I'm just kind of focusing on, to mention, the shadows. Get his head in, his hair, kind of bring that around. Kind of working these ribs a bit. The abdomen. Just try to think in shapes and cylinders for this guy as well. So again, kind of build in the shadow a bit more. And in this instance, I might go in with a marker, paint marker to kind of really put in the super dark darks. I don't want to completely cover over all the hash marks I put in because that still gives another depth of contrast. From the highlights to the midtones, it kind of just gives a tertiary layer of tone there as well. So be curious to know if anyone has tried any of these techniques before, and if they have a favorite or one they kind of use more often than not. These are techniques I kind of learned back in school, but just kind of stuck with me. Really kind of universal and timeless, but I find it's always kind of good to check back in with how you learned and see how that's adapted over time for yourself. Kind of learn one style and then somehow kind of make it your own adaptation of that too. So yeah, that would be two kind of different styles I've played with here. Paint and ink on this particular one with a bit of paint with the marker. And this one here is a continuous line using a pencil kind of play that out. So these are two styles that I tend to use. I'm going to cover a few more here in a bit. Papers replaced. So to keep it going, I'm going to use charcoal for this particular pose. Like there's a good twist here of the hips and shoulders, looking back. And this one here, also some good twist, but some areas just kind of see-through, and also some strong dynamic over the shoulder twist as well. So for the one of the guy, I'm going to use ink for that. And this technique for me is fairly loose as well. Just kind of want to figure out where some of these dark spots are. And I'll just kind of start with the head and shoulder. Kind of get the hair in, just kind of see how that's feeling. Again, not too super worried about details. I don't want to fill in too much dark right away. I'm kind of determining my anchor points and whatnot, just to make sure the proportions feel good. I believe I'm going to fall into another situation here where gonna end up going off page, but that's okay, because this is more about technique for me than final artwork. Want to show more the process. His other hand's kind of poking out here, and this one there. Cool. So it's pretty quick. I find the ink's really fast for me to get this down and figure things out. But again, I can go in and add a bit more detail to kind of figure out the shape of things like the nose and face. So, and the great thing is this one has a lot of highlights and lowlights, especially with this beard and chin and hair to kind of really help anchor things back in. Kind of keeping in mind too, always like the rules of thumb for measurements of things too. Not that it has to be specific, but you know, generally a body works out to being about 6.5, 7 heads tall, provided everything's pretty symmetrical. Generally about 3 heads wide across your chest for males, a little different for females, but not much, in all honesty. And even with things like faces, there's like a rule of thumb where the corner of your mouth, where am I at here, generally is the middle of your eyeballs, and your eyes, the width between your eyes is the same as one width of one eye, and then same width, it gives you the width. So generally your head's 5 eyeballs across, generally. So it just kind of helps when you're thinking about proportions and placement of things, that if in this instance you're not looking directly on at this person's head, you kind of have to shift your mind perspective to look at it from a 3/4 angle. It's looking this way, and kind of figure out, does that space still make sense and read well. The hands, I'm just gonna again block those in. Allows me to get there quickly. Lower back. I want to make sure there's feeling like there's a lot of weight here, because all of this guy's weight is on his butt. So same idea as before. I'm going to block in the areas I'm going to shade. Work that in with the brush. And I call this a brush, but it's actually a pen, but the bristles act as a brush, so you can actually get some wide strokes like that, or some very fine detail too, as you can see. So it's pretty fun to play with, but you can go through a lot of ink with it too. So, you know, really shadows for me are my biggest ally when I'm trying to figure out placement of things. I think before I used to use the highlights more, and for me that just didn't really work as well as playing on the shadows. It just gave me a lot more weight, and I think the weight is really crucial in making your art feel believable. So that's how I would generally play around with an ink drawing. So for this one here with the twists and whatnot, I'm going to use Conte. So generally I use black for this. And I tend to start with like just kind of lightly putting in the shape of the head. Then I like really working with the shoulders and then like the shape of the body. Kind of get down to the hips. And almost like a stick figure is how I tend to work when I'm using this material. Just kind of work that pose in to see what it's actually going to be like. So again, really quick, just kind of hammering those shapes in and figuring that out. So just get the shape of the face kind of loosely in, understand the shape of the hair. Doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, it's just more about getting that feeling. So get that shoulder in there. Make sure that forearm makes sense. I tend to use the side of my Conte a lot. Hey Andrew, how are you? Thanks, Terrence. Yeah, hopefully we can catch up later on. So at this stage too, I'd even like draw through what I see in the hair to kind of get the anchor of the body where I want it to be. So in that instance, I made her back a little too low. Hey Samantha, how are you? So working mainly just getting the position of the pose down. And this arm here is really kind of pushing against the wall. I'm not really loving all my anchor points right now, so I'm going to rework them a little bit and almost exaggerate them. I like to work with a lot of sharp lines and angles when I'm playing with this too. So similar to the ink drawing, I kind of really make sure those shadows make sense to me and use them to my advantage to figure out where things actually live and where the proportions make sense. So I want to give that wrist an area where it kind of pops. Have that thumb pop out. And then the clothing and material she's holding, just kind of give that a bit of weight. She's standing on her tiptoes to make sure that heel pops. Cool. So again, this is kind of two different techniques to kind of figure out shapes and different styles. So as you can see here where I use the ink, things are a bit more kind of open. You use your own eyes to kind of fill it in. It's a bit looser, you might say. But this one here, I kind of use a lot more harder edges. I use more edges of the actual Conte itself. So it kind of just gives a really different feel based on what the two end results are looking for me when I'm kind of figuring out my process for using it later. So I'll recalibrate, start again. So in these final two, I'm gonna work on this one using pencils. I just think it's a pretty cool lighting for one thing, and the twists and the shapes are really wild. And this one here, I'm gonna use charcoal and play a bit more with this. Just the angle of this one that the photograph has is really super dramatic. I mean, her legs obviously aren't likely as long as they look in this photo, but it kind of makes for a cool illustration. So I'll start with him, and I'll just really figure out where his head goes, his shoulder, his other shoulder. Use the spine as a line down the back, get to his butt, and his other cheek, kind of come down to back of the knee, the calf here, down to the heel, and down to the feet. Just really quickly put that in place. I can think about seeing through here as well, which is really important, as this leg would actually almost come out to here to a knee, and then there'd be a twist, and then the calf would come in here, play out to the heel, and then that would just push into the wall. And this shoulder anchor point here, come down to the lat, back down in here. There you go. Play with the neck. So again, this head is going to move a bit just based on where I'm finding things are going. Bring that into the elbow, and then that forearm is going up the wall with his hand holding there, and the other hand here. Again, seeing through this area, building in the elbow, and then that's going back up to this arm. So that's just a really quick kind of get that in there to where the anchor points of the body go. It's just the wall, the window, corner of the room. And then from this point, I'll go in and add more definition and shapes to there. So again, using the shadows same way I would at any time to kind of help me build that shape out. And again, you can use the cross hatching, shade it as dark, as light as you may want to. Get the shape of that quad in there. Does this kind of look like you, Andrew, when you're stretching at the gym? Right before your orange theory. This guy seems to be having kind of a hard day. He's got his head buried into the wall against his hand. So yeah, that's how I would play this out a bit, just to kind of get an understanding of that shape. I may go in later if I was kind of using this as a base. If I was doing the same size, I'd almost put this side by side something I was working on and kind of define the lines a bit more. But using a pencil is actually pretty smudgy. As you can see, I can kind of make a bit of mess, which can also kind of give some interesting texture to your drawing, but also makes it really everything kind of a mid-tone, so you don't get your highlights as intact as you may otherwise. So it's just something to be aware of the materials you're using based on what you want the end result to look like. And for this last one, I think it's just a fun pose. It's super dramatic. I'm gonna go start with more of a gesture kind of vibe. But I want it to be quite loose. So again, just to kind of really play with that, really gestural, quick, get that in there, and have it be really loose. And I actually think I'll make this even more dramatic than it is, based on her placement of her shoulder. So as always, I'm using the shadows to build out the shapes and lines of what's really kind of going on here for me. Even for things like details of the face don't have to be that super detailed. They can just be outlines and just really shapes to kind of give that impression of what's going on. And the great thing about charcoal and Conte is you can kind of get those shadows in really quick by using the different sides of the material. So, again, a very different kind of look and feel here. I want to play with her shadow of her face a bit more. So what's in highlight is really in highlight. feels better. So yeah, I think it'd be kind of good to show these side by side and give you an idea technically how they're different. So here you have the pencil drawing, 6B, kind of messy, but really kind of allows you to get that shapes in there really quickly and play with the tonal a bit really quick as well, especially where you're able to smudge it so much. And this one here with the charcoals, just really kind of quickly to get that gesture drawing and the dynamics down and play with those edges to get it in really quick and effective, just to kind of figure out if this is going to work for a bigger piece. So then the ink one here, really gestural loose, kind of playful. This one here, I'll pull it back a little bit for you. A little messier, a little more angular, but you can kind of see how I really drew through the character to see where the anchor points were. Where this one here is a bit cleaner and more about the contour and the shadow shapes. Kind of fun to see the evolution of the night go by. So this was the first one. There we go. Here. So that was the paint wash with the ink and kind of really getting that dynamic play. And as you can see with the arm against the wall there, you kind of get that almost vibration of what's going on with the arm, almost like a shadow or movement. And this one, I always find these look really weird to me, but I think they're just fun and good practice to do to kind of loosen up your brain a bit, to kind of play with the contours and kind of not lift your pencil and keep going around and around in circles until you kind of get the lines you're looking for. So I'd be curious to know who uses these different styles and techniques, and what ones work for you, what ones feel effective, or if you've ever played with them or really even wanted to learn more about it. I'd be happy to chat about it sometime. So that's kind of my techniques that I tend to do when I'm gesture drawing. So when I'm working with models or going to life drawing classes, things like that, I try to bring an array of tools of things to play with, just so I can kind of mess around and have fun, because that's what this is about. It's kind of just figuring out how you like to use tools, and then kind of learning more about the body, because once you can draw the body, you can literally draw anything. One other thing I kind of wanted to show you, I was working on a piece a few weeks ago, and felt a bit differently about it than I had initially. So this particular piece I had started using an acrylic wash to kind of play this out. I guess we're getting the mic in the way a little bit, so I might move that. So I just kind of took some time away from it, played with it a little bit, and looked at it, and it wasn't quite jiving with how I was envisioning the piece to go. I just found the colors weren't working for me, so I actually went back and started again, and kind of found like this was feeling a bit more natural as a background. So in comparison, they're both about at the same stage of development for this particular piece that I wanted to do. But I kind of wanted to share as well two different approaches and vibes for that. So next phases for this one, it's a bit softer. I think it's going to fit better in the room and space is going to live in. So again, I'll work in next more details of the backgrounds and definitely more of the foreground, which will have like wildflowers and butterflies going on. But yeah, wanted to share that process of, I'm not always happy with what I do the first time, but it's okay to go back and rethink it, and always kind of keep learning and think about other techniques that are like, oh, if I'd only done that a little differently, let's go back and try that. So yeah, this is feeling much better. I'm liking the wildness and the splatter here to kind of build up the foreground. That'll keep playing and working in with what's happening in front of that moving forward too. So yeah, I'm a lot happier with this one. So I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in and hanging out in the studio tonight, and hope you have a